At least 12 that I know of have been killed, and dozens of others taken and tortured, intimidated, beaten, purely because they worked for the British government. I don't think the government has dealt with this issue effectively, because in actually physically evacuating these people who are at risk is possibly the biggest acknowledgement that the British government got it wrong in Iraq.
Last week, 5,000 people protested about the lack of security in Basra. They demanded the resignation of the police chief. To make matters worse, almost half the population of southern Iraq faced food shortages last month, according to our poll. The official version is that we've done our job and handed over to friendly Iraqi forces. The truth is bleaker. The British people were deceived about the reasons for entering this war, and now we're being deceived about what we've left behind. Though the British are pulling out of Basra, 600 kilometers to the north in Baghdad, the Americans are digging in.
Advancing the cause of freedom and democracy in the Middle East begins with ensuring the success of a free Iraq. Freedom's victory in that country will inspire democratic reformers from Damascus to Tehran.
George Bush says Iraq has turned the corner. With violence halved in Baghdad, the president claims political progress will now follow. I'm off to Parliament to find out if it has. The only way for me to get there is in an armed convoy along roads lined with blast walls and endless checkpoints. The Parliament is in what's known as the Green Zone, 10 square kilometers of heavily fortified compounds in the center of Baghdad. Among them, the new American embassy.
The largest embassy in the world, acres and acres and acres of it, costing $1 billion, more like a small country than an embassy.
It's got Iraq's only Olympic-sized swimming pool, shopping malls, and its own missile defense system.
Yesterday there was a mortar attack on the Iraqi parliament where we're going now, and there's just been a car bomb explosion in a hospital just near here.
Democracy came to Iraq in 2005 with the first post-Saddam elections. Iraqis themselves are optimistic. Our poll found that over half of all Iraqis think their country will one day become fully democratic. Because of threats to kidnap or murder people who work here, filming is restricted. We're confined to the media room and filming other journalists. The only way to watch Parliament itself is on a television. The big disagreements are edited out. But this Parliament is riven with sectarian rivalry between Sunnis, Shia and Kurds. They can't even agree on the simplest of things.
I'm here on a day when the Iraqi MPs are debating the design for a new national flag. It's been a heated debate, and in the end they seem to be settling on a temporary expedient lasting just for 1 year.
The Americans wanted 18 key pieces of legislation agreed in Parliament by now. Only 2 have been passed.
This Parliament was meant to be the centrepiece of George Bush and Tony Blair's gleaming new Iraqi democracy. Well, it's quite incapable of providing a functioning government. As I speak, more than a dozen key ministers have vacated their posts. Meanwhile, the Speaker is threatening to dock salaries because so few MPs are turning up. This is not a Parliament which works.
There were over 20 assassination attempts last year of politicians on their way into Parliament, so it's not surprising that many of them have had protection. Adnan Dulaimi is a leading Sunni politician. 2 car bombs were found in his backyard recently, while his militias have been accused of sectarian killing.
There is no truth that some of your personal security detail, your private militia, some would call it, have been involved in sectarian killings.
أعتقد أن كل الحمايات مخترقة وتنقية الحمايات وتطهيرها أظن أمر صعب جدا. رئيس الوزراء نفسه قال لي أن أبناء عمومته معه في الحماية أرادوا أن يقتلوه. الحكومة والأمريكان لم تستطع أن تقضي على الإرهاب، ولكن نحن وقفنا في وجه الإرهاب.
Round the corner is the office of Baha al-Araji, a leading Shia politician. He helped to write Iraq's constitution. Over half of those we polled think democracy is making their country better, but Mr al-Araji is sceptical.
Who, in your view, is the real government of Iraq at the moment?
الحكومة العراقية بموجب الدستور وموجب القوانين العراقية هي التي تدير البلاد، لكن من الناحية العملية هذا غير صحيح. الملف الأمني على وجه التحديد لدى القوات المتعددة الجنسيات.
So where does that leave Iraq? To find out, I accompanied David Miliband when he visited Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Behind the scenes, the British and Americans have lost faith in al-Maliki because he's seen as too weak to manage Iraq's warring factions and too close to Iran.
This is Iraq's Downing Street. We're in the ante-room of Prime Minister Maliki's official residence. Though how far his authority really stretches beyond the very heavily guarded gates 100 yards down the road is a very arguable point.
5 years after we invaded, and the British are on their way out, the democratic experiment is failing. In part 2, we'll find out who's really in control. I've come to Baghdad to assess the situation after 5 years of British and American occupation. I've joined the US 64th Armoured Brigade on patrol. The city is now broken up by thousands of miles of peace walls separating the warring factions.
The most murderous fault line in post-invasion Iraq is the sectarian divide between Shia and Sunni. We're actually on this fault line at the moment.
At its worst, there were almost 2,000 sectarian killings a month in Baghdad alone. Early last year, President Bush flooded neighborhoods like Qadra with extra troops in what is now called the surge. Violence is down very sharply.
This is where we got popped at a lot.
It's Captain Cannon's second tour in Iraq. When he returned in May last year, his company was suffering 10 attacks a week. One man was killed on this very spot. The area has been transformed.
You ask any of my soldiers 6 months ago rolling through here, even in 1151s or even tanks, you know, they pucker up just a little bit. So what we're doing right now, walking across it, pretty big deal. Haven't been able to do this for a very long time.
18 months ago, the United States conceived the audacious idea of paying its enemies to change sides. Today, former insurgents are in charge of security in their own neighborhoods. These so-called concerned local citizens have made all the difference.
What sort of guys belong to the CLCs?
They come from all over. To be perfectly honest with you, as part of the reconciliation effort, some of these guys were involved in Al-Qaeda, working here in Qadra before the security situation got the way it was, because that was the best show in town. They paid the best. They were the most powerful. This is the better show right now.
6 months ago, the chap behind me would cheerfully have killed me for straying into this area. Now he's providing protection. The big question is, how much longer is America prepared to keep on paying him? And what will he do when America stops?
The Americans now control over 80,000 CLC members at an estimated cost of $24 million a month.
Given that you're paying these guys, they sort of report to you. Doesn't that make you the government here?
In essence, yes, we do control them because we pay them. But that's just kind of a necessary evil that we have to accomplish to get these guys out in the street.
The theory holds true. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
If your objective was to topple Saddam Hussein, spend 4 years chasing various unattainable dreams of democratization, and finally in 2006, through a surge, decide to work with exactly the same tribal leaders we were marginalizing in 2003 and say, doesn't matter that they're crooks or doesn't matter that they're tough men, there are tough men, and all that matters to us is achieving some kind of basic security. Well, yes, sure, we've succeeded in that.
The new strategy was worked out here in Saddam's old headquarters. David Miliband has come to discuss the success of the surge with its now famous architect, General Petraeus.
The important thing is that we both feel that the security improvement over the last 6 months has created an opportunity for a real political drive, both at national level and at local level,